Okay, now for the fun part. We're going to go through all of the different species that we grow here at Little Acre and the tips and tricks on how to grow them at home. So we're going to start off with oyster mushrooms. So this is Pleurotus ostreatus, and unlike a lot of the other mushrooms that we grow, we can see that there's a very, very big difference in colors here. So we've got really nice caramels, blue mushrooms over here, really bright whites. And so this is a single species, but it does have different shades of color. So that's really, really interesting, and it allows you to have a lot of variety in your mushroom growing when you've only got to really build the conditions for one species of mushroom. So oyster mushrooms are a fantastic beginner mushroom because they're just really easy to grow and they grow on so many different substrates. Okay, so you can grow these guys on sugarcane, on wood pellets, on cardboard even, on kitty litter. They're really, really hardy mushroom, and it's the one that everyone should get started with. So just to guide you through what we have on the table here, over here we've got our warm white oyster. Okay, now it's called warm white and it looks really dark here, and there's a reason for that. This mushroom here actually changes its color depending on temperature. So if you grow this guy in the summer months in like up to 30 degrees, it's actually going to really grow a much more whiter color like this with a little bit of a brown tinge on it. Whereas if it's really cold like it is at the moment in winter and it's getting below 15 degrees, this actually brings out the color a lot. So you can see that this is actually warm white oyster, but it's got this amazing caramel color. It's really, really nice. Over here in this basket, what we've got here is our butter oyster. So it's a really nice caramel color as well. And we've also got the blue oyster at the front here. So this guy starts off really vivid blue as it's growing, and as it matures, it sort of grows into a bit of a steel gray color. Okay, so you can see the different colorations in the blue oyster there, and these guys love really cold temperatures. So you've got a really great variety here if you're down in the southern states to be able to grow blue oyster. And then over here, this amazingly white oyster mushroom here, this is the snow white oyster. Okay, so really brilliant white color. Okay, and if it's grown at a really cold temperature or at a slightly warmer temperature, it doesn't vary its color at all. It stays this really bright white. So the oyster mushrooms here that we've got vary from caramels, browns, grays, blues, and whites. And they're just a really good mushroom to get yourself going, because even though it's one species, it comes in different colors and it also comes in different temperature ranges. So the warm white oyster that some people are growing in their buckets, in their mini farms, this one is upwards of about 20 to 30 degrees it's best grown at. Whereas if you go down to the blue pearl here or the snow white, this guy loves cold temperatures. Okay, so a question that we get asked is a temperature ever too cold? And for the oyster mushrooms, not really. The colder it gets for this particular type of mushroom, it actually just slows its growth down. So if you've got this snow white oyster here and it's going down below 10 degrees, it's not going to kill it at all. It's just going to really slow down its growth. Whereas if you've got a really warm temperature and you're growing the warm white, it's going to grow really, really rapidly fast. So don't be too concerned if you're in a really, really cold state. You just want to be able to choose a mushroom that can handle the cold temperatures, and if it drops below that, it will just slow the growth down. But the colder the temperature can bring out the coloration in the mushrooms here. So the oyster mushrooms here, they can be grown in both buckets and in bags. So it's a great mushroom to get yourself going, especially if you're going to be using recycled containers, because you can see these bunches here are just popping out the size of this bucket. Whereas also over here on this bag here, it's forming a big bunch of mushrooms. So the convenient thing about using a bucket is you can control the size of your bunches. If you've got those smaller holes and if you've got them distributed, you're going to get a nice little cluster of mushrooms on the side. Whereas if you've got a big bag of mushrooms like over here and you've cut the X in the top to let it fruit out, you're going to get a big mass of mushrooms just like that. And so for something like this, if we were going to pick it, we would want to pull the entire bunch off, and then you can pull those clumps apart and be able to get smaller bunches from it. Whereas in the bucket over here, you can just pull off a single cluster at a time and more little clusters will pop through. So the bucket method is amazing for oyster mushrooms. So highly recommend the bucket method for the oyster mushrooms. Now, something to be wary of is with oyster mushrooms, they're really susceptible to carbon dioxide. So as we know, mushrooms exhale CO2 and breathe in oxygen, okay? And they don't like to sit in their own CO2. And what happens with these oyster mushrooms, if they do sit in a high CO2 environment, is their stems will get really long and skinny. And that's not good for anyone because the stems are a bit chewy. And what you're trying to promote are these really big flat caps, okay? So If you're starting to see that your mushrooms are getting really long skinny stems, this is a signal that you've got a really high CO2. And if you've got them in an enclosed room, or if you've got them in a container where you've trapped the humidity in, you might want to open that up and let some of the oxygen in. And you can, these guys give you signals about if it's got too much CO2. Okay, so you want to just trust your mushroom and just see what they're doing, and you'll be able to know more and more. The more you grow, the more you'll be able to understand how you want your mushrooms to grow and how you want them. So the bucket method's really good because you can just pick off a bunch of mushrooms just by popping it off, and we'll do that right now. So if we just grab a bunch just on the front here, and we just pull away. So pick the oyster mushroom bunch straight off like that, and you can see that that's a beautiful, great big cluster there. And you can actually cook them straight like this. So people would have seen different recipes where you can just place that directly on your frying pan and put a cast iron frying pan on top, and actually cook that down into a nice big massive mushrooms on your frying pan and get it really crispy and beautiful. Really great protein swap instead of using meat. So these flavors do differ between the different varieties of this species of mushroom, just very subtly. And if you grow the different varieties, you'll be able to sense that. But that one there is your warm white oyster there, and beautiful, great big cluster. Now for a bucket like this, another bunch of mushrooms will form out of that hole soon. So in knowing when to pick your mushrooms, the oyster mushrooms, you want to pick them just before their caps upturn. And you can see here, this bunch of snow white oysters is absolutely perfect for picking. I've actually got another bunch of mushrooms that I'll just grab. Of snow white here, and you can actually see the difference. So these caps are actually upturned like that. So this is past its prime for picking, okay? If we're delivering to some of the best restaurants in Australia, we're gonna deliver them the mushrooms that have their caps downward turn. What's actually happening here is when they got their caps upturned, they're actually releasing their spores. And if you've got these on a bench, you'll find a big white powdery mass underneath your bag or your bucket. So you want to try and pick these before they upturn their caps. It's actually going to allow you to store these mushrooms for longer in the fridge if they haven't dropped their spores. So for premium picking, pick your oyster mushrooms just as the caps are turning upwards. Don't let them go as far as this. And this is perfect. So just a little bit more and you just pick that straight off. Okay, so I'll pop that one just there. So these are your oyster mushrooms here. So Pleurotus ostreatus comes in a great variety of colors, and we've got all of these colors on our online store for spawn that you can grab. Just check the different temperature variabilities and just have fun at home growing these in your buckets, in your recycled containers, and in your mini farm. Okay, and they can be grown on sugarcane, on straw, on paper pellets, on wood pellets. So they're an amazing mushroom. You can get really great big bunches like this, and they are fantastic for those substrates, but also the pasteurization method that we'll go through in a later module. They work really well for that. So they're a very, very forgiving species of mushroom, unlike some of the other species that we'll touch on that are very much more trickier mushroom. The oyster mushrooms here, in all of these amazing colors, can be grown by any of you at home. Okay, so we really recommend that you start with these guys and give us your feedback in the